had to say today, as someone that is in Louisville, I took 50 million notes. I don't know what's about to come out of my mouth. but I just pray, God, let it be what needs to be heard, because I had a ton of notes, particularly this week, election week, and thinking about everything that has taken place in Kentucky, especially over the past, 2-3 years, especially with the pandemic and Breonna Taylor. And I thought about, and I'm not going to say the school, but an incident that took place here when you mentioned school that happened this week on a campus, and this young black girl was called the N-word over 200 times, right? And everybody spoke about the composure of this 18, 19-year-old girl. And I thought, black women are tired of being composed and restrained. And y'all know it's true. You can clap for that because it's right. It's right. I thought about everything that Vivian said, that race, what we need people to understand is at the beginning of every inequity. Without racial inequity, there would be no health inequity. But at some point, we need white people to see that and ask the questions like you did. What am I not seeing? As I said, if you look all around you, what is difficult for some people to understand is that racism is built into every single system. Every system. Even when you talked about AI, it's built into AI. Why? Because who is programming it? And until we acknowledge that, we will not get down the road. I was asked this week, because the judge that signed the no-knock warrant for Breonna Taylor is no longer on the bench. And I was asked this week, well, Hannah, is this the road to healing? And I said, here's the problem I have with a lot of people. You want to get to healing and skip over justice. And my focus is walking this road to justice. And there are people in positions of power who often ask marginalized people, black people, LGBTQ, transgender, Latinx, how do we fix this? We didn't break it. So the real question for me, particularly for white people, asks just how did we get here? Because this is not a system I designed. When you talked about AI, I always ask myself, whose imagination is this? I didn't design this. It wouldn't have looked like this. It would have looked like how your daughter's going to school with all different types of children. It would have looked like no racial inequity. Everybody has health care. It would have looked so who made this up? And what we have to understand is because it's imagined, it can be changed. We can change it. None of this is set in the stone. If we said today is the day that everybody's accepted, then so be it. We have to act like it. Like you said, Vivian, this at the micro level is a heart issue. And people ask me all the time, well, Hannah, when will racism be done? When is this going to be over? Because, I'm tired of talking about it like I'm going to wake up and not be black tomorrow, right? And so, and I tell them, sadly, racism is never going to end. And let me tell you why. I'd like to tell you it would. Because people keep planting the seeds. As long as you keep planting this, like everything you said, Vivian, as long as you keep planting this, then this is what will continue to grow. And until we decide we do not want this harvest anymore, then we will continue to live like this. But is this living? Is this living for real? When we aren't neighbors? when I can't come up on your porch, when I can't come inside your home, are we living or are we existing, surviving, not thriving? All why? Because somebody told you you're supposed to hate me because I'm black, because I'm LGBTQ, because I'm a woman, because I'm a Democrat, because I'm a Republican, I'm supposed to hate you. This is so basic to me, to break bread together as neighbors, break bread and get to know people. When you leave here, really get to know somebody. Don't just call up a black woman when you need a vote, when you need her to do something for you. When you need this, don't just extract from them. Pour into them. Don't always take away. That's being a neighbor. Sometimes a neighbor brings you a cup of sugar. Am I right about it? A cool glass of lemonade. When's the last time you brought a cool glass of lemonade to your neighbor? Come on, am I telling the truth? I didn't know what was coming out of my mouth, but that's what I said. Go ahead, Miss Carla.
I don't know. Keep talking. Keep going.
You know, honestly, if I can just say, and I spoke about this online, and any of you all picked this up, because this is a challenge for me. And I spoke about a scene I'd seen in a movie called One Night in Miami. It was about civil rights leaders. One was Jim Brown. He's in the NFL. And he was on a porch, as we are, and he went to go visit a family friend who was white, went to go visit him. And the family friend came outside and talked to him, and they shared a glass of lemonade. And they talked football stats. And his granddaughter came outside and said, Granddad, I know you're talking to Jim, but I need you to help me move this piece of furniture in the house. So when you have time, come on in. And Jim Brown said, well, you're moving furniture, let me come inside and help you. And the grandfather said, now, Jim, you know I don't allow N-words in my home. But you keep making us proud. You're doing a good job. And if you ever need anything from me, call me and I'll help you. And in his mind, he was content to leave Jim on the porch. He thought he was a neighbor. But in his heart, as you had said, Vivian, they were never neighbors. He didn't see him neighborly. And a lot of us are content to give the appearance of being a neighbor instead of inviting people inside the home to have a real conversation, to ask tough questions, to ask, what am I not seeing? That's what it's about. Inviting people off the porch. Don't just give the appearance of being neighborly because it feels good, because you look good, because you can post a TikTok about it. And look what I did today. And I went to the march today. And then I went in the booth and voted a whole different way to continue to hold down black people and LGBTQ and to keep kids from learning the truth in school. But I made a sign and I posted it. That's not neighborly. That's not how we get there. And this is the last thing I'm gonna say and I'm done. It is not going to feel good. It never feels good to look at yourself and see the ugly in you. And we all have it. We all have the bias. We all think things we shouldn't. And you have to ask yourself, why did I think that about that person? Where did that come from? And you have to do some soul searching. And I always want to ask people, tell me the person, because I really want to know who this is, that told you it was going to feel good. That you weren't going to have to confront some things. You weren't going to have to confront your friends and your family members. Who told you that? So I could tell them, you have really messed up. Don't ever tell people it's not going to. The only thing I can promise you in dealing with these issues is that it's not going to feel good. But if you have the courage to fight through it, to fight down that road, then you get to experience something like your daughter is and learn about Harriet Tubman right? Then you get to experience retreats and working together. You get to experience loving who you are in your name. You get to experience all sides, having a conversation. And it's not going to feel good to get there. But I promise if you just press through, on the other side of all of that ugly, there is this beautiful world. We just have to fight to get there, but it's there. I promise you it's there. And it just has to be it's worth it enough to me for your daughter to exist in a world where she doesn't have to ask, Mama, where are the white kids in my school and the black? That's over. We're all together. It's worth it to me. And that's what you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? And for me it is. For everybody up here it is. It's worth it. But it's going to take some work. Do the work.
Thank you. I think each person has raised the question, how did we get here? Whose story is it? Whose imagination is it? And I want to ask Neonu, you're studying the stories, the narratives. This whole conference is dedicated to sacred story. I'd love to hear a little bit from you about how did we get here? What are some of the stories that are embedded in our religious traditions that you are thinking about needing to overturn, and many of the speakers over the course of this time together have talked about?
So many stories and narratives and that are deep-rooted in terms of how we got here. And there are answers and explanations, and those answers and explanations fall short because they don't make sense. So certainly you can uncover historical facts of groups of people sitting in rooms and coming up with decisions, and conferences called Nicene and the like to come to mutual interpretations and hermeneutical exercises to say what God is and what God isn't. There are academic spaces that you can look back in history of people who wrote papers to say what God is, what God isn't. What are we going to call this people here? Who are the savages? Who are the enlightened ones? Who is not worthy of being deemed human and therefore very much subject to domination, slavery, and violence? Humans, people, we can read their books, we can read their narratives and see where this categorization that I talked about, this hierarchy that I talked about that created the circumstances that led to, the transatlantic slave trade and the laws that were created that specifically allowed this type of environment to flourish, to be enforced. There are very specific things that we can look at in history. This is not random, it is constructed. And so when Hannah says, we've got to think about how did we get here, because I wouldn't have imagined it that way. I wouldn't have written that law. I wouldn't have wrote that book. And so the question is, well, it was done. So I think what we're hearing today is, what are the stories that we are going to write today? What are the laws that we are going to construct today through our voices, through our involvements, through our activism in our local communities? What is the thing that I'm going to say and do when I leave this space today that creates the narratives so that 50 years from now, hopefully there is, 200 years from now, hopefully there is, that people aren't looking back and talking about us as the perpetuators of the narratives that would cause us to have this conversation on the couch.
Amen.
Yeah. I'm wondering, our time is running down. We've talked a lot about the kind of space that is required to get up every day and come back into the work. So how do we find joy? How do we find the will and the capacity to keep going? I'd like to hear each person on the panel talk about your own personal practice And it's going to be different because the work we're all doing is different, right? But let's each person share a little bit about what you do to bring yourself the space and the determination to keep going. We'll just go right down the row.
To be honest, things like this do a lot for me. At the end of the day, keeping your eye on the prize. Everybody here in different ways, in different language, have talked about what we're trying to build. And that's been inspirational. And every once in a while, we kind of forget. And then I meet people who surprise me. And I mean, I was just speaking at a high school on Monday. Oh my gosh, I was so jazzed after being a day with all those high school kids. Like, I couldn't sleep. I'm like a little kid who just got outside. Oh, there are people again. It was extraordinary. For all the ways that we know and that technology uses to manipulate us in the worst ways, because we have that in our nature, we're also wired to connect. We're also, at a very core level, wired to build better things. So just keep the eye on the prize and meet other people that inspire you, that are different. And that does a lot for me.
Great. You gave everybody an assignment to mark their calendar for joy and agape. Let's hear it. What do you do?
Yeah, each day I start with some type of contemplative practice, because I am a planner, a doer. I like to say I'm a recovering type A type of person. And I could get up in the morning and get on my phone and just go. And what I have learned is that when I do that, I really forget my base, that connection I talked about it, my oneness, that thing that really will allow me to enter in a space when it's going cuckoo, when someone says something to me off color that would really want to get me out of my space. If I don't ground myself, then I may enter in that situation in a way that I will regret it, and I don't want to be on anybody's news channel, right? So in the morning, really, I have to ground myself, remember who I am, remember the divine being that I am, and regardless of the circumstances and situations, that I am good and things always work out for me. Now, that doesn't mean I don't get out of in the world and use my voice, and I have been gifted and brought here to be an active participant in transforming the world. So I'm going to do my part, but I've got to get grounded first to be able to do that.
We've been given a little bit more time, so we'll keep going. Don't feel pressed. They gave us new time on the clock.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I definitely would agree that, quiet and solitude is something that I go to go within through my contemplative, my meditation practice, my, looking to wisdom teachings to fill me with insight and perspective. And I can really say community has been a very powerful force for me, because when I've gotten weary, it is divinely orchestrated that every time I get a text, an email, a card, a call for somebody, a Facebook post, somebody telling me that what I have contributed matters in their life. And that is like an immediate fuel spark for me to know that this is, where I am to be. I'm very clear on my intention and my mission. But then again, I have to revisit it on a daily basis to stay clear in that, and that grounds me. I definitely feel like sometimes, I can think, when you go away and you think like, this is so amazing to be away and to be out of it all. But at the end of the day, I am called to be in this work. And I will not be satisfied to just live comfortably and, just luxuriously knowing that this is all going on and I'm not, weeding my part of the garden.
Love that. I just thought of the best story. Maya and her little sister Stella and I were together the night of the election announcements. Were coming in, and I was trying to cut my little one's hair. So we came up with this strategy. I think Maya actually came up with it, to pretend we were doing spa in our bathroom, which none of us know what spa is, because I'm not a spa person, and they're 6 and 9. So we made it up. We did it. We were like lotioning each other's legs, and the girls said, "Mama, just think of yourself in your happy place, Mama," because I think they thought that would be spa-like. And the 6-year-old said, my husband had yelled up, "It looks like Raphael Warnock's going to lose." And I was like, "Ah!" and I was trying to explain a little bit of it to them. And then the Stella said, she's rubbing my leg, she said, "Pretend Raphael Warnock won." and then, but this is so great. Then Maya said, "Pretend you're on the couch reading Gay Ross," whose name is actually Ross Gay. And if you haven't read his book, he wrote the Book of Delights, and he has a new book called Inciting Joy. He's a poet, and he's an essayist, and he's just like, I just can't get enough of his work. And so Maya said, "You're on the couch, and you're reading Gay Ross." And it was such this beautiful reflection for me of like, they know those are my happy places, right? This like political and literary thing. So it brought that to mind for me. But I do live in a co-housing community. I'm with Vivian on community being the thing that keeps me moving. It's an interfaith co-housing community, and it works, it's structurally, it is what someone imagined. It's about radical hospitality, and it's about interdependence, and it works against what I think of as the real curse of whiteness for white people to get liberated from, which is the notion that privatization is going to solve everything, that we are independent, that we have all been, come up by our bootstraps. So my personal journey around that is constantly pushing back against my own conditioning to not ask for help, to not be I'd like to help. I'd like to be the savior. That's like such a white lady thing, right? That's my comfortable place, is to be the one to have the resource to offer the thing to help with. So in my moments of messiness and vulnerability and exhaustion, and I need someone to bring me a cup of tea, like how do I learn to be interdependent and work against that conditioning? Feels like a big piece of it for me.
Thank you. Hannah, why don't you answer the question and then ask or say the final word. Close us out.
I think, and I agree with all of these things. One, and this is for myself, so I'm preaching to myself, because I will not lie. I don't practice these things as much as I should.
We're all works in progress.
But certainly for myself, particularly as a Black woman, my advice to Black women is to go lay down, go to bed, go rest, and do it without feeling guilty, right? We have this guilt attached to it. It took me a minute to stop doing that and learn the art of saying no. And no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain it anymore. Can you do the thing? No, and then go on about your business. But and also I think this came to me this year, and I had read the book They Were Her Property, which talks about enslaved people, and it dawned on me that Black women were never brought to America to have joy. Black women were brought here as property to do a thing, and or many things. And that persists to this day. And I realized for me to have joy, I was going to have to imagine that space and then create it. And me being happy and having joy really is the act of resistance, because it was never meant for me to have it. It was never meant for me to walk in love and be joyful. Everything was done to Black women to prevent that. And so I take the time to find, that's why I love this, and I wrote it down to them, I'm gonna do it, to find my little piece of joy in the world. And what I hope for us, for Black people, Black women, and all of us, is that we don't have to just find a little piece of joy, but we can just live in joy and abundance all the time. But for now, let's take our little pieces. Your piece, my piece, your piece, all together will create the world that we want to exist in. That's it.
Thank you very much, everybody, and to all of our siblings, our kin, our neighbors, do what is needed for you to touch that place in your heart every day as a practice. And this is what we will endeavor to do together. Be K-ords. Let's dream this future into being. Thank you.